Hello and welcome to Education Talk. This is one of your best programs on education on television, where we review various challenges faced by teachers and students, and also we bring solutions to these challenges to you. I'm Wilma. Today we will be looking at the Trojan Horse leaked report, and also, should teachers be paid on results? With me on this program is a very well-known guest, Dr. Chris Imafidon. He's a consultant to presidents and monarchs. Dr. Chris, you're very welcome to our program today.
Thank you very much for your wonderful introduction and your kind invitation.
Thank you. Now let's start with the Trojan Horse leaked report, which says pupils are not being protected from extremist views at a Birmingham school. David Cameron has asked for a full account of the row between the Home Secretary Theresa May and Education Secretary Michael Gove over allegations of extremism in our schools in England.
In terms of tackling extremism, I mean, I set up the UK Extremism Task Force, which I chaired after the appalling murder of Lee Rigby, because I wanted to make sure the government was doing everything that it could to drive extremism out of our schools, out of our colleges, off campuses, out of prisons, in every part of national life. And I think it's very important that we recognise that you've got to deal not only with violent extremism, but also the sink of extremism, of tolerating extremist views from which violence can grow. And the whole government is signed up to that agenda and is driving through changes to deliver that agenda. As for these issues for the last day or so, I will get to the bottom of who has said what and what has happened, and I'll sort it all out once I've finished these important meetings I'm having here.
Prime Minister David Cameron there. Dr. Chris, why has this caused a row between the Home Secretary Theresa May and Education Secretary Michael Gove?
It's funny you're using the word row, because really there are delineated portfolios within the cabinet. If it has to do with schools, it is Michael Gove. If it has to do with the law and order, it's Theresa May. So I shouldn't think there's an overlap whatsoever between the two. So if you know that it has to do with schools, the only person that is accountable for anything that goes wrong with school, that has the ultimate responsibility, is education.
But we are talking about extremism here in our schools, and Theresa May is the one that oversees extremism, not just in the school, in the country and in our society and communities as well. And there are allegations that she hasn't done enough to protect the schools.
So the Education Secretary therefore reports to the Secretary in charge of law and order, because it still is unclear. If it rains in a school, he is held responsible. If there is a breakdown of law and order in school or any academic institution, he's still responsible. He does a referral. I mean, this is an age-old division that Moses was given when he was asked, appoint 70 elders that will deal with different things while you focus on one thing. The Prime Minister has his role, the Home Secretary has her role to play, the Justice Secretary has his role to play, and then this is the interesting thing, the person that the Chief Financial Officer of the entire country is the Chancellor, has his role to play. So if there is funding problem, the Education Secretary reports to the Chancellor of the Exchequer. If there's law and order problem, he refers to the Home Office Minister. So it's always been an issue. There have always been some schools that are hot trouble spots that even have police stations in the schools. So you can see that the police are accountable or submit themselves to the authority of the head, and the head invites them in for referral. I mean, it's always been a well-known line or division of labor. I don't think this is new. I don't think this will be the first. I don't think it should be last. So the word row is totally unnecessary. I think the Education Secretary ought to send all his reports to the Home Secretary, and the Home Secretary protects. The Home Secretary is in charge of security and safety of every citizen. The Education Secretary is in charge of the education of every child or every student that is involved in any form of learning or the other.
Let's look at Ofsted inspections here. How comes this has been overlooked and it wasn't tackled initially till the Trojan Horse report was leaked?
It didn't need to be leaked. The leaking reports suggests that there is no communication between one department and the other, and that's almost typical of a parliamentary system, where you have departments that are artificial. If we know that there are issues of funding, for instance, today with a school, we've thrown off the exchequer. If we know for any reason at all that there's likely going to be a severe weather condition, who do we get to? We get to the Met Office, and the Met Office talks to the minister in charge of climate change. So we have well-defined roles. If the Education Secretary responds, and it always does, then the Secretary of State in charge of Home Affairs, or the Home Secretary, should wait for the report to be handed over to her. There is no need for anybody to leak it. Plus the fact that there are regular cabinet meetings anyway, and everybody has each other's telephone number. It's just a telephone call to say, we have this tiny issue coming up. Please, can we have reinforcement? Or please, what would you advise me to do on this issue?
How best should we deal with extremism in schools?
Education and training. The mind it's very easy for you to have a mind polluted, and it's very easy for you to have a mind sanitized. If you know that you have values, that is core to education. They say the fear of God is the beginning, is the very beginning. So if you go and acquire knowledge and you exclude the fear of God, that mind is going to be warped. If you have a mind that is in tune with godly values and moral values, if you give them education, if you give them knowledge, if you give them wisdom, they will use it for service. They will use it for the good of the community. You cannot have an educated mind that is self-destroying. You cannot have an educated mind that is intent on causing havoc. So if you have extremists coming in, if a child is educated, if the students are educated, they'll be the first person to put up their hand and raise the alarm and say, we think what we've been taught in school, we think what we've been taught by the university is being, if you like, subverted, or is being perverted, or is being polluted by another group of people that believe in violence. If we know that we have to coexist as members of the human race, we know you have to respect you have to give mutual respect for one another. The issue of extremism does not come into it, because your training immediately rejects any extremist view, and you know, because you are grounded in a way of thinking, you are grounded in what you should do as a member of society to make positive and only positive contribution. You're not just making any contribution. So the issue of destroying one another, or destroying one another's properties, or even trying to target one another for self-destruction, I mean, it doesn't even come into it.
Should such be included in the school's curriculum?
It was core of education. Before every formal learning started, there was a place called the assembly. Every child of every age, of every year, comes to the assembly. And that assembly was, first of all, you're gathering unto God, the maker of the thing you are going to study. God, the creator of what you are going to learn about. So if you have followed that pattern, that prehistoric pattern, it's always been there. Then the issue of, you don't even have any fear of extremism coming through, because you know that the child has been taught in one way, the student has been molded in one way, and the only thing the child or the student sees is something that will bring more contribution, that will bring the upliftment of the community, not bring self-destruction.
So this has come about because our kids have not been properly educated. Because
they've taken out the creator and they are studying his creation. He's at the core of everything. If you exclude the creator and you want to know about the creation, it doesn't work. The equation means that there's a fundamental element that's missing from it. If you don't seek of him that made it, you can never know it. I mean, that's what a popular Oxford professor said. You have to first of all find out who is he that made it. The creature is never bigger than the creator.
We'll come back to that to talk about extremism in schools, but first let's look at the teachers. Now, over half of teachers in state schools in England support linking pay to pupils' progress and results, suggests a survey. The National Foundation for Educational Research polled over 1,000 teachers for their charity, Sutton Trust. Some 55% of primary teachers and 52% of secondary teachers said incremental pay rises should depend at least in part on performance. Now, should teachers be paid on results? Would that help things? Would that make them teach better?
As things start now, and I mean, having served on the boarding girls of schools, it is very evident that if your school is failing, it'll be taken away from you. It's very evident if there's a school, there's a secondary, high school or secondary school today that is scoring below 19% pass rate, there's intervention. So I really don't get the context of this discussion, it must be evident to anybody that if you plant a seed, you want fruits. So if you invest your time as a teacher in students, you expect results. If the government invests in teachers, they also expect results. If there is no performance, there's no delivery in a non-serious sector like the supermarket, they shut down the supermarket. If there's no performance or delivery in the banking sector, they review and they shut it down. So why should we even begin to think that productivity should be debated? It is very, very clear that in order to get the best of our students, for our students to be able to compete globally, we must bring out the best. If a football manager is sacked for his team not delivering, why would we exclude teachers from being exposed to the reality of life?
So to bring out the best means to pay them more.
We have to reward excellence. There's no way we can reward mediocrity. We have to reward excellence. We have to nurture experience. Whatever you celebrate and you reward, that you replicate. The ones you don't celebrate is the ones that you're going to go with. So we cannot celebrate failure. We cannot give the same recognition, reward to a group of teachers, for instance, that are underperforming or producing students that are underperforming.
They may need more training, more support, more help, because sometimes teachers have complained that they're in troublesome schools where the kids are really from dysfunctional families and they hardly concentrate in class.
That's fine. That means before the failure occurs, before we have the report of the performance. So if I had a group of students, for instance, I took them in the first term from September to December. And at the end of the first term, I know where I'm heading to. I have a target, even if it's not imposed on me by government. I have a target that every child I'm taking this year should pass their exam in June. So by December, I do a review. If I find out that a particular student is going to miss the target, it is my responsibility to call the parents, call my colleagues that are teachers in the school, senior and junior, and say, how do we tackle this problem? That's the question. I'm not saying I know the answer to it. I'm saying let's conference, let's debate, let's discuss. Say, this child is doing this way. We intend for the child in June to be able to achieve this level. But right now, we started the journey in September, and by December, we're not making any progress whatsoever. What should we do? So if we are able to take such preemptive steps, the issue of non-performance will be gone. So we review at Christmas. Then we implement new changes, and this is what I've always done if I have students given to me. Then we implement the new changes from January. By March, we do another assessment. And then we say, I think what we've done in January, we need to do more of it because it's produced this positive result, or less of it because it's not producing the results we are doing. So you are constantly reviewing yourself as a teacher. How much impact am I having on the students? You are assessing the students. How much impact is what I'm doing having on them? So it's a two-way street. And then the students, okay, I think I would do better if I had my maths period in the morning, first thing. I'm just giving a very practical example. Let's have maths first thing in the morning instead of last thing in the afternoon, or let's have English first thing. So we can swap the subjects around. We can look at what the student really needs in terms of the type of materials, additional support they require. If it means having an after-school club on that subject-specific area, a lunchtime club on that subject-specific area. There are practical steps anyone can take to be able to reverse failure.
So the students themselves should contribute to how things are run in the class.
Oh, I always get feedback from my students. They are the recipients. If you like, they are the people that I'm standing in class because of them. So if I'm speaking French and they do not understand French, it is my responsibility to get an interpreter in French to get the message across to them. So I'll do anything I need to do to get my students to understand the concepts.
Okay, still talking about the students now, the latest stage of exam reforms tackles a range of non-core subjects. Subjects such as applied science and electronics could cease to be GCSEs, and there are more than 20 GCSEs and A-levels which could be discontinued from 2016. Now, Dr. Chris, will this help the student at all?
No, it will never help any student. If you're calling some subjects core and others non-core, and your line of demarcation is essentially talking about applied and non-applied, because electronics is applied science, chemistry is pure science, physics is pure science, biology is pure science, agriculture is applied science. Why do you want to draw a line, a very artificial line for that matter, between students that have particular interest in agriculture? Are you going to disable them, or are you going to say, let them end up disenfranchised? We must accommodate the interests of every scientist, whether it be pure or whether it be applied. So if a child in class is very fascinated by electronics and wants to rip the computer apart or rip the VCR apart so that they can explore that aspect, and they come back and write a report on it, why must we deny that child or that student the opportunity to pursue their interests?
But what the Ofqual's chief, Glennie Stacey, is saying, sometimes there is an overlap between two subjects, and she feels those subjects could be merged into one. They shouldn't necessarily be two subjects, because the kids are virtually learning the same things.
If you're worried about overlap, then, or you want to rationalize courses, do it, but not compromising the interest of the students. Some students only see science through the applied window, or they see it through the pure window. So some students, you put them in a physics class, they'll be disruptive. But if you put them in an electronic class, which is applied physics, they'll be excited, and they will ask questions, they want to discuss with you, they want to do things, and they will not want the class to end. Are you going to disadvantage those group of students? That's a fundamental question. I do not believe that if a child tells me he loves playing one musical instrument, because I do not have teachers in that, or because I do not have facilities to be able to teach that particular instrument, that child should not be a musician. He may be a gifted string instrumentalist. I shouldn't say, oh, I'm only going to teach wind instruments, because this same principle can be applied across the board to say, this type of subject, we're not going to teach it again because of X, Y, and Z. And what I'm saying is that if you have students taking that subject, if you have students indicating interest in that subject, please don't frustrate them by academicizing, because I looked at the report, the whole slant is towards very academic subjects. So instead of teaching economics, for instance, they want to say, everybody go to the economics class and forget about business studies. When really, business studies is the application of the economics, fundamentals of employment in a business environment. So why should we shut down business studies because we want to rationalize? There are some students that will never, no two students are the same, no two individuals have exactly the same spectrum of gifting. We know that from the DNA of humans. We know the variability. We must accommodate every interest.
So it wouldn't be in the benefit of the students taking out these subjects, definitely. Okay, we'll come back to that and see what the students are saying. But one of the most celebrated icons of education in our time, a teacher, civil rights leader, writer and leader, Dr. Maya Angelou, passed away on May 28th at the age of 86. God loves me, I am grateful for it is one of her most iconic statements. A lot of her writings were inspired by her Christian faith.
The hearse carrying the body of Maya Angelou leaves the home where she died quietly in North Carolina at the age of 86. The prolific African-American author and poet achieved international acclaim for her groundbreaking memoir, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, which charted a childhood of oppression, racism and abuse in the Deep South in the 1930s.
When it looked like the sun, when it looked like the sun.
Raised by her grandmother in Stamps, Arkansas.
Imagine it. A black girl from a little village in Arkansas, smaller than this little town here, this little village. Imagine it. Now considered one of the most important writers. Imagine it.
But Angelou was also a playwright, actress, singer, dancer and professor during her long career.
If you want to get Maya Angelou to do something, tell her she can't do it.
She penned more than 30 books and won numerous awards. In 2011, US President Barack Obama gave her the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the country's highest civilian award. She became a role model for those seeking to overcome inequality and injustice.
Maya Angelou penned more than 30 books and won numerous awards. Dr. Chris, what are the ideals about her life that teachers can learn?
It's interesting what we were discussing earlier. You see, she always said each time she was writing, before she began writing, she prayed. She said, so she draws inspiration from her faith. Then, anytime she's doing any major writing, or even minor writing, she has a Bible by her side. The Bible was a reference point. She draws inspiration from her parents and grandparents and the exposure she had while she was young. So you can see that the foundation, a strong foundation, especially at childhood, will always determine what you become in life. If you have a shaky foundation, there is no way you can build a superstructure on a shallow foundation. And she exemplified that in her values, in what she campaigned for, in her belief that everyone should have the same opportunity. And so when people look at her and how she was able to weather all the storms she had in life and still was able to put a smile on her face and was able to go on and then document these things, these experiences. That's what her books were. Her books were, if you like, quasi-autobiographical. They were things she experienced rather than just great work of fiction. She learned from every single life experience she went through. She had to document it and share that wisdom with the current generation and future generations.
You talked about having a very strong foundation for our kids, and that is actually what most parents should concentrate on now, making sure their kids have a very strong foundation for the future.
Yes. When a child asks you a question, what he's saying is he or she is introducing herself as a student. He's saying, why is it necessary for me to share my food with my sibling? So you are now taking the child back to the fundamentals of love, thy neighbor as thyself. Because if you are well fed and your neighbor is hungry, you bring in a lot of imbalance to the society. When a child asks you a fundamental question and saying, is it really true that we should not work on the Sabbath day? The child is asking you a great question about rest, about holiday, about the creation of the universe. It's an opportunity for you to educate that child. So if you have such opportunities, what we've not been able to do as a species is to be able to teach parenting skills and explain to parents what they should do to children when they are 1, when they are 2, when they are 3, when they are 4. And then be able to lay the building blocks until when they get to 7. Because at 7, there are a few things you cannot reverse. So you now have to come for another layer of reinforcing the original values you taught. Why do we need to do, for instance, work together as a group instead of working individually? Then you then bring out the social benefits of cohesion. You don't talk about how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. So you're bringing out fundamentals at a very, very young age that the child will learn and then be able to apply when the child steps out in the main world.
In this world, it's a very fast-paced world. Parents are extremely busy. They may not have all the time for their kids. So how much time is enough a day for a child?
Oh, 5 minutes is far too long. 5 minutes. 5 minutes, you can teach one principle. And then tomorrow we'll spend another 4 or 5 minutes to teach it. And you don't have to sit down and say, now a class is going to start. When a child asks a question while you are driving, you can discuss with the child. If you're doing anything, you can be doing 1 or 2 things at the same time as having a conversation with the child. You think you're having a conversation with your child, but the child receives instruction, receives learning, receives wisdom from you because you made the effort to be able to share with them what you've seen or what you've experienced.
Well, for parents who have any more questions about how best can I give my child a good foundation, you can send emails to educationtalk@loveworldtv.co.uk. Just before we go, you have some webinars coming up. You've had one last Tuesday about parents and on SATs. Now, why should parents attend these webinars? These webinars are free, we know, but tell us some of the things you'll be talking and teaching in these webinars.
The training of children is something that is so massive, but we never ever have any serious discussions, contribution, and exchange of views on it. We go for driving lessons before we are given the keys to drive a car. We go for training before you become a doctor. You become, if not, you'll kill people. You go for training before you become a lawyer. But we need to have similar training as parents so that we can maximize the genius in our child. Most of us don't even realize there's a genius in the child, let alone how to discover that genius, how to develop that genius, and what you do in terms of deploying that genius. So it is very, very important that every parent that has a child, I don't care whether it's at the first grade of school or right after birth or graduating from university, you need to know how to relate with your teenage son or teenage daughter. You need to know how to relate with your toddler son or toddler daughter. So it's a wide spectrum of parents wanting to answer basic questions about how best to get something out of a son that loves football, wants to play football all the time, and does not give any hoot about the academic subject. Or a daughter that loves theater and wants to act all the time and does not give any hoot about this. Those are fundamental things. How do I get my son to top the class? How do I get my son to get a scholarship? Those are some of the things that we'll answer. We always answer at such meetings.
What do you do for the child that loves football? Do you discourage him from playing football?
Oh no, you must encourage him to play football. You must show him why he sweats when he plays football. That's biochemistry. You must tell him, the day he gets injured playing football, you sit down and have a class on anatomy. What part of your ankle was injured? Why was it injured? What will you do to it next time? So that's physical education you're teaching the child. That's human biology you're teaching the child. If you take the interest of the child, accommodate it, but use it to teach fundamentals. Football is a mathematical game. This is the reason why you scored the goal you scored. This is why you missed the goal you missed. So you cannot separate the child's interest from the education you want to provide for the child. And the child will be far more interested in what you are teaching if you accommodate his interest or her interest. If you say, no, football is useless, don't play football, you must stop then the child gets very, very resentful because you have not. You just said something to him. You're saying that what you're doing is of no importance. Meanwhile, he believes it's of supreme importance.
Which means parents should know how to link the football game with what is actually happening in class.
That's what we teach. I mean, Fabrice Muamba is a case study that was able to play football for England at every single level, yet topped his class when it came to maths. In fact, he's on record as the youngest student to graduate from his school, high school, scoring the highest grade in maths. Why? Because his football interest was married perfectly, after instruction and guidance, of course, with his mathematical interests, and his interest in reading and writing was boosted. Why? He was asked to write an essay on his favorite footballer. So he used punctuation, paragraphs, and all what you will require in writing. So if you're able to marry the interest, and you can, if you attend any of the webinars, you'll be given the tools and the materials you need to be able to marry your son's interests or your daughter's interests.
We're rounding up now. Just one sentence for students writing exams. Is the exams period. What should they be looking out for?
As a student, remember the exam is just to expose the knowledge you already have in you. So what you need to do is get the past paper. I can never say this enough. Get the past paper, jettison the textbook, get hold of books, revision books like the maths manual. Email us, we'll be able to send you more links about where you can get past papers from. They are PDFs, they are free. You don't have to pay anything for them. And if you join the webinar, again, we'll give you more links on that. You don't have to pay anything for the videos that come with them. They are free if you're a visual learner. The podcasts that come with them, they are free if you're an auditory learner. So if you're a blended learner, you have all of them. So you cannot tell me one reason on the planet why you should fail your exam. You are made to top the class. You were designed for success. And we're here to give you the tools and the facilities to achieve that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chris. Lovely to have you on this program, and we look forward to having you next week.
Pleasure.
Well, viewers, if you need more information, if you're a visual learner or auditory learner and you need the podcast or wherever you need, send emails to educationtalk@loveworldtv.co.uk and we can give you links on how to join these seminars. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of our programs.